welcome. I'm Pia and you're watching NewsX Eurozone. Let's take a look at the headlines this hour. Prince Andrew, the brother of King Charles III, has been stripped of his royal titles and his mansion in Windsor after a statement from Buckingham Palace. Last week, Virginia Giuffre's posthumous memoir was released, which repeated allegations that as a teenager, she had intercourse with Andrew on multiple occasions. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban says that he hopes to convince President Donald Trump that Hungary should be exempt from US sanctions on Russian oil in an upcoming meeting in Washington. Chinese President Xi Jinping has held his first formal talks with Japan's new Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi at the APEC summit in South Korea. Seen as a China hawk, Takaichi has recently toned down her rhetoric on Beijing after taking office earlier last week. Israel has returned the bodies of 30 Palestinians to Gaza as part of the ongoing exchange under a deal brokered by the United States. Under the truce, Israel is to return 15 Palestinian remains for every deceased Israeli hostage. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has met with counterparts from China and India, beginning a series of face-to-face meetings at the ASEAN Defense Ministers Summit in Malaysia. This follows Washington seeking to bolster regional security ties in the Indo-Pacific. In Yemen, 43 UN staff will face trial on suspicion of links to Israeli airstrikes that assassinated Houthi leaders in August. The UN has repeatedly rejected Houthi accusations that their staff were involved. US has cancelled a planned Budapest summit between President Donald Trump and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. This has come after a tense call between the two countries' top diplomats and Russia's hardline stance regarding territorial demands. Heavy rains have lashed New York City, killing 2 people. Mayor Eric Adams has now confirmed the fatalities as accompanying storms disrupted flights, and authorities have warned of floods in some areas. Well, viewers, those were the headlines. Now we're tracking some very crucial information at the top of this hour. The leader of the other Ukrainian movement, Viktor Medvedchuk, and a former head of Ukraine's For Life party, has slammed Ukrainian President Zelensky's peace plan. He stated that Western claims of peace are false while calling President Zelensky an illegitimate leader. He's further emphasized that Europe's plan is an attempt to compel Russia to relinquish its position. He's been a controversial figure in Ukrainian politics as his view strongly aligns with Russian interests. It's also interesting to note that he is living in exile in Russia and has been placed under house arrest as suspect of treason and illegal exploitation of Crimean resources. Medvedchuk has been constantly writing against Zelensky's handling of this particular war. He's also been accused by the government of Czech Republic of funding a pro-Russian propaganda network. Meanwhile, former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko has also been a sharp critic of Zelensky's policies, but has been vocal on active defenses against Russia. There are voices from Ukraine who criticize President Zelensky's policies. However, they support the war efforts, and there are disagreements with the policy of negotiations of the government and its stance as well. Even the pro-Russian parties have shifted their stance since the beginning of the war between Russia and Ukraine. With us on the broadcast is Professor Andrew Latham. He's a professor of international relations, joining us from Minneapolis. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Interesting developments coming in as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. We're seeing voices, Ukrainian voices, some of them are pro-Russian, some of them, even though they are critics of Zelensky, they have still taken a hardline stance as far as their aspirations as Ukrainians are concerned. What do you make of the recent statements coming in from Viktor Medvedchuk?
Well, I think Medvedchuk is an outlier, to be sure. His very pro-Russian stance is not completely unprecedented within the Ukrainian political establishment, but his particular brand of it certainly is. So I think we can, at one level, discount Medvedchuk, but he's emblematic of something which is of importance, and that is that the Ukrainian political establishment, is not monolithic. There are disagreements. Zelensky is not considered by everybody to be some sort of secular saint. And so, as in any political organization or political set of institutions, there's disagreement. There's disagreement about Zelensky's goals, which are maximalist. There's disagreement about the means to the ends that he's advocating, which are basically no real negotiations and continued militarization and victory on the battlefield. So to the extent that Medvedchuk draws our attention to those internal divisions within Ukraine, this is an important story.
Indeed, and I also want to draw attention to the larger developments we're seeing as far as this war is concerned. We've also learned that the meeting that was planned initially between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Budapest has been cancelled. There was apparently a memo sent from Russia to Washington. A phone call was held between Marco Rubio and Sergei Lavrov as well. Russia has been unyielding as far as its territorial claims are concerned. It's adopted a very hardline stance. Meanwhile, the US has backed Ukraine and is calling for a ceasefire first. What, in your assessment, will take place next?
Well, I think that the Ukraine war has to be placed in a broader context when it comes to U.S. and Russian relations, which are on again and off again frosty, sometimes warm, more often these days frosty. I don't think that, Vladimir Putin really does want to take all of the provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk. And until and unless he acquires those territories, he's not going to sit down at the bargaining table. Donald Trump and his foreign policy advisors really want the war to end along the current lines. They just want the war to end. And so you can see that and of course, President Zelensky wants all of Ukraine's territory back, which is never going to happen. So you can see how there's at this moment, no real way forward. These two positions, both parties, the US and Russia, are dug in, and they're not going to make concessions. As the battlefield evolves and as Russia makes its incremental gains and recaptures all of Donetsk or captures all of Donetsk and Luhansk, then I think we can see the conditions of possibility for a fruitful negotiation, fruitful end to this conflict. But until that happens, I'm afraid this war is going to grind on, no matter what Washington has to say about it.
Indeed, and there was a meeting also held between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping yesterday. And, the war was raked up, although China's imports of Russian oil were not touched upon. This is something that Donald Trump has emphasized after this meeting. Meanwhile, he's also stated that the United States and China are going to work together to end this war. I wanted to understand from you, what are China's interests? Because although we've not seen China openly backing Russia in this war, unlike North Korea that has sent its troops, China has not done so. China has not sent its military equipment as well, although it is transferring fiber optic cables, lithium-ion batteries, dual-use items that Russia is using to manufacture fiber optic drones to strike deeper into Ukrainian territory.
Yeah, on the one hand, China's trying to strike a balance here. On the one hand, in its sort of titanic global struggle with the United States, it wants friends, allies, and partners. And Russia, if you recall, on the eve of this war breaking out, Russia and China declared they had this unlimited friendship. And so it's not willing to throw Russia under the bus at this point. On the other hand, it would like the war to end, preferably on Russia's terms, but it would like the war to end. Simply because it's causing problems for China to be kind of walking this tightrope, as it were. You're right to point out that China is not providing military aid, but a lot of dual-use aid and a lot of diplomatic cover. And so, again, there's a lot of time, energy, and resources that are being diverted to this Russian war against Ukraine that China could use elsewhere. There's also a matter of principle. China, obviously, because of its aspirations to lead the global South, is always talking about the inviolability of sovereignty and inviolability of territory and non-interference in other states' affairs. Well, Russia seems to be violating all of those things. So another reason why Beijing would prefer this war to be off the global radar, as it were. But will China abandon Russia? Absolutely not. Not in the context of great power competition with the United States. It simply can't afford to lose that friend, that partner, and that ally.
Indeed, and one last question. I'm digressing a little bit from the exact war itself, but the United States has recently, Donald Trump has come out and stated that the U.S. is looking at resuming nuclear tests after a period of 33 years. Now, the U.S. is not party, it's not ratified the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. There are a lot of voices from across the globe that have now objected to this, including Russia, including Iran as well, who have come out and slammed Donald Trump's decision. But how do you read into what Trump has announced? Is this mere posturing? What is he trying to signal here?
Well, it is posturing based on a misunderstanding. The Russians had declared that they had tested two nuclear-powered weapon systems, one undersea drone and another a cruise missile, basically long-range hypersonic missile. Their engines are nuclear-powered. They do not have nuclear warheads. The Russians haven't tested nuclear weapons since 1996, nor has China, nor has the U.S., even though the U.S. has not ratified that. They did sign the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Trump seems to have misunderstood the difference between nuclear-powered and nuclear warheads. And so he heard this news, and his reaction was, well, if they're testing nuclear weapons, which they weren't, we're going to test nuclear weapons as well, a kind of childish tit-for-tat, as it were. I think he's going to have to walk this back in his inimitable fashion because the United States is not prepared and does not need to resume nuclear testing. They have simulations that are better than the real thing. And nobody in the American nuclear weapons establishment is hankering for a resumption of live testing. So Donald Trump made a mistake. He uttered a policy change that is not going to take place. And I rather think that and hope that this passes from the news agenda sooner rather than later.
Indeed, sir. Requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking further developments. At the opening of the first International Festival Peoples of Russia and the CIS, Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu has delivered a strong message warning that any attempt to defeat Russia by force is doomed to fail. Shoigu has stated that history shows Russia's enemies have repeatedly tried to divide the country for their own gain, but the unity of its people has always prevailed. He's warned that globalist forces are spreading consumerism, selfishness and cynicism, weakening societies and turning nations into colonies. Reflecting on the post-Soviet era, he's also emphasized that Russia has faced ideological attacks meant to erode its traditional values and has stressed that the nation's strength lies in truth, justice, love, family and devotion to the motherland's principles. He's further stated that this continues to guide and unite the Russian people. More news coming in. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has now stated that he hopes to convince US President Donald Trump to exempt Hungary from US sanctions on Russian oil because of its high dependence on pipeline networks for its energy supplies. Orbán has stated that he will discuss US sanctions on Russian oil companies Rosneft and Lukoil with Donald Trump at a meeting scheduled for the 7th of November. He's also stated that Hungary aims to conclude a broad economic agreement with the United States. The new U.S. sanctions were announced days after a fire at the main Danube refinery of the Hungarian oil group MOL. The fire forced the refinery to operate at reduced capacity. Now, Hungary's government has published a draft legislation to amend a law on stockpiling of imported crude and crude products. This aims to enable Hungary to designate standby filling stations to provide fuel to critical users in a supply emergency. Orbán's talks with Trump next week will be his first bilateral meeting with the U.S. president since his return to the White House. Still with us on the broadcast is Professor Andrew Latham. Interesting statement coming in from Hungary's Viktor Orbán. We do know that the Hungarians have time and again tried to stall EU's aid to Ukraine. So this has definitely been a sticking point as far as the war is concerned. But at the same time, Hungary is also not just energy hungry, but it's also dependent on Russian oil, considering its geographic reality of being a landlocked nation and its proximity to Russia as well. Do you think the Trump administration will take into consideration Orban's concerns, considering his rapport with Trump?
Well, it depends. If Trump's policy is governed by Trump's personality, then he's likely to concede much to Viktor Orban because he considers him to be a friend. They are singing off the same song sheet often. If, however, American policy is guided by American interests, well, American interests lie in a negotiated peace, but that in turn relies on continued American pressure. And that American pressure relies on the European Union and NATO, of which Hungary is a member of both, to continue with a rock-solid front projected towards Russia. So if American interests govern this meeting, there's likely to be a lot of pressure on Hungary to toe the line. If it's about personalities, then there's likely to be some concessions made. And from Orban's perspective, one can understand this. He has struck this semi-pro-Russian, semi-pro-European posture since this war began. He is in a landlocked country which depends on Russian oil and gas. He's trying to do, I think, in his view, what is best for the Hungarian people. But he is likely to be caught, like a lot of nations in this conflict, he's likely to be caught in the crossfire between, usually between Moscow and Washington. In this case, it's between one version of Trump, which is governed by his personality, and the other version is Trump, which is governed by his sense of America's true national interests. Either way, Orban is going to be in the crosshairs.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank you for taking our time sharing your insights with us. Meanwhile, viewers, we're shifting focus to some crucial developments from the Middle East. Israel has now returned the bodies of more than 30 Palestinians to Gaza as part of an ongoing exchange deal under the US brokered ceasefire plan. The Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Younis has confirmed that it received the bodies of 30 Palestinian prisoners from the Israeli side. Now, as per the deal, Israel is to return 15 Palestinian remains for every deceased hostage returned by Hamas. So far, Israel has handed over 225 bodies to Gaza. This exchange is significant as it reflects that both sides have kept the deal alive. The peace deal has been considered fragile since its inception with the signing in Egypt's Sharm el-Sheikh. Though there have been strikes in Gaza from the Israeli side and also provocative statements from government officials, as well as firing from Hamas, summary executions that have taken place within Gaza. Despite all of this, the deal has largely been followed up until now. This is the latest that we are tracking on the broadcast. Israel, of course, has to return 15 bodies, Palestinian bodies, for every body of a dead hostage that it receives. Israel has, of course, received 2 bodies in the last 24 hours. They've been identified as Amiram Cooper and Shahar Baruch. In fact, the identities were confirmed in a statement put out by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office. The families of the deceased were informed after the completion of the identification process by the National Institute of Forensic Medicine. In fact, the handing over of these bodies via the Red Cross had taken place a day after the Gaza ceasefire was shaken by a series of deadly Israeli strikes across the enclave. Hamas has so far returned the remains of 17 of the 28 deceased hostages that it had agreed to hand over as part of the truce deal that was brokered by the United States of America. Meanwhile, Al Nasser Hospital has confirmed receiving the dead bodies of 30 Palestinians as well. This is the latest in the hostage exchange that is still underway. With us on the broadcast is Major General Sudhakarji, Senior Geopolitical and Strategic Defense Expert, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking out time and speaking to us on NewsX World. We've been seeing this process continue. It's been quite a fragile truce deal. We've seen ceasefire violations take place. The IDF claims that it was Hamas that violated the ceasefire by striking and in fact shooting at some of its soldiers, which resulted in the death of one IDF personnel. Israel struck back, and about 100 people have lost their lives in the series of strikes that had taken place in Gaza. There were also strikes that had taken place in West Bank as well. And now we're seeing that the ceasefire is still holding. Israel is returning the remains of 15 Palestinian for every deceased hostage returned by Hamas as well. I wanted to understand from you how much further can this really hold? Critics are pointing out that Hamas is stalling. Hamas has clearly made its the shortage of heavy equipment and the sort of difficulties it's facing on the ground clear. There's a team from Egypt that has allowed a heavy excavator to be deployed within Gaza to remove the bodies from the rubble as well. Where do you see this headed?
Yeah, good evening. Thank you for getting me for your show on a very sensitive and quite a fragile issue, I would say. Being a military man, we are trained to work through all kinds of military resistance and interference. I would give the same response that let's give peace a chance. And we have to keep working through the collapse of the peace talks. We have to keep working through commitments, allegations, counter allegations, and we need to push it ahead because the kind of genocide one is witness to, it doesn't go down too well in 21st century in a rules-based international order. I personally feel, regardless of all kinds of breaking of the peace talk, we should give a fair chance to this. Back to you, Pia.
Indeed, and I also wanted to understand from you, at the moment, Donald Trump has been calling for an international coalition to be involved on the ground, whether and roping in allies from the Arab states, whether it's Egypt, Qatar, UAE, or even Turkey for that matter. Interestingly, the IDF recently put out a statement registering its apprehensions on Turkish troops on ground in Gaza. Why do you think they've done so, and what could be the concerns Israel has with Erdogan?
I, as a very independent student of geopolitics, my mind also gets stuck there. The question mark comes up. The moment you hear any footprint or representation of Turkey anywhere in these kind of sensitive, vulnerable issues, we should keep Turkey as far away as possible, have only neutral elements who do not have any direct or indirect selfish interest to derive or gain from this particular deal. Turkey is part of the game, I would say. And we all know Turkey, Qatar, Pakistan, their arch enemy is Israel. To have Turkish troops there in middle of such a kind of a controversial turn of event, I personally feel the neutral force needs to give a revisit, relook. I understand that he's playing a very important role in having, in fact, Donald Trump had given him the full loose rope that you please take the initiative, make sure that the talk is through in the Qatar and wherever Egypt, and we need to have a deal for sure. So he has somehow or the other, he has managed to get a deal, but at what cost? Keeping Turkey there, there are chances of issues getting manipulated to their interest. Because if Israel is the arch enemy of Turkey, and visibly and in the behind the scene, Qatar is there, and Pakistan is also playing to the gallery. Now, it will make these kind of complex conglomeration of neutral troops very, very difficult. We need to have people or troops from the countries which are neutral, comparatively neutral, not Turkey for sure. It is too close to Israel. It has got a common border. It has got common interests, challenging, rather clashing interest. So I would rather advise people who matter in the chain that we should try and keep Turkey away from these kind of groupings as far as possible for a better and effective outcome. Back to you, please.
All right, sir. With that, I would like to thank you for taking our time sharing your insights with us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus to news coming in from Latvia. Latvia's parliament has voted to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention, a major European treaty aimed at combating violence against women. Now, the decision was passed on the 30th of October, that is yesterday. It saw 56 lawmakers in the 100-seat parliament back the move after the Greens and Farmers Union, a coalition party, broke ranks with Prime Minister Ivica Silina. Silina and President Edgars Rinkēvičs both opposed the withdrawal, stating that Latvia should remain part of the convention. Around 5,000 people protested in central Riga a day earlier, urging lawmakers to keep Latvia in this agreement. Signed in 2011 and ratified by Latvia last year, the convention defines violence against women as a human rights violation. Latvia now becomes the second country to quit the treaty after Turkey's exit in 2021, which drew sharp criticism from the European Commission. Listen in.
Latvijā vardarbība nebija aktuālā tēma, izņemot dažus atsevišķus ekscesus. Un to dēļ arī tika grozīti daži likumi, nevis konvencijas dēļ. Starptautiski, protams, ka starptautiski šobrīd būs tāds nosodījums, jā, bet mēs esam suverēna valsts. Mēs savu viedokli varam paust caur parlamentu vairākumu, un ja mēs nolemsim tā, tad mēs darīsim tā, kā vēlamies.
All right, with that, viewers, due to paucity of time, this is all we have for NewsX Eurozone. We'll continue to track these developments very, very closely. In the meantime, we're dipping into a quick short break. Hello and welcome to NewsX World. I am Pia and you're watching the World Report. Let's take a look at the headlines this hour. Following the Trump-Xi meeting at the APEC summit sidelines, the United States has agreed to suspend Donald Trump's 24% reciprocal tariff on China for another year. Israel has received the bodies of 2 deceased hostages as part of the truce deal. The identities of the hostages have been confirmed as Amiram Cooper and Shahar Baruch. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has denounced US's nuclear testing announcement, stating that it is a regressive and irresponsible move and a serious threat to international peace and security. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has stated that the Asia-Pacific region is set at a critical inflection point with a rapidly changing global economic order as he's chaired the APEC summit in Yeongju. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has denounced Russia's massive drone strike on Ukraine's thermal plant that has claimed 3 lives. Zelensky has stated that it is an outright terror and the world must respond to this. Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te has once again rejected China's one country, two systems policy. He has asserted that Taiwan will resolve to defend its freedom, democracy and sovereignty. The Turkish Foreign Ministry has stated that Pakistan and Afghanistan have agreed to extend the ceasefire for at least another week as both countries plan to meet again at a higher level gathering in Istanbul. Hurricane Melissa has confirmed death toll has climbed to 49 with at least 30 people dead in Haiti and 19 in Jamaica. Forecasters estimate up to $52 billion in damages. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has defended the decision of U.S. President Donald Trump in resuming nuclear tests after a halt of 33 years, calling it important for American national security. The directive issued has generated widespread concern and condemnation from international bodies working for arms control. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has called the United States' plan to resume tests as regressive and irresponsible. These remarks are significant as Iran has faced sanctions from the West for pursuing its own nuclear program that it insists is peaceful. U.S. President's decision is largely seen as a strategic and political signaling rather than a technical necessity, as the United States has already in possession of an extensive and reliable nuclear stockpile. The move may reignite a nuclear arms race with China and Russia while paving the way for continued tests by countries such as Iran and Saudi Arabia also that have long sought a nuclear umbrella. The Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, signed in 1996 to prevent further nuclear testing, has now come under strain after this particular decision.